Good evening. This is the last day of March in 2023. I haven't gotten in front of the camera like this for a long time because what I'm actually reading for myself has not been as fast as it used to be. So um, I'm working through it, but I actually have my other projects. I'm actually putting a lot of things on this channel for audiobooks purposes. So those are out there. You can see them. I have playlists galore that you can go check out. Currently, I'm actually in the middle of doing the Bible. I'm probably on the second book only. What'll probably be about a 4 year project, give or take. But that's gonna spend a lot of my time. But in the meantime, let me talk to you about books. So here is one that is from one of my favorite authors, Andrew Vachss, and I've got an entire shelf behind me that has essentially his entire fictional library. I haven't gone together and gotten some of his actual law books or the ones that he's put together for like psychiatrists or whatever else to talk about, these crimes against children that he pretty much is his bread and butter. But all the ones he's done, like his Burke series, his Cross series, and whatnot, all on a shelf behind me. Actually, what I noticed later on, after I got through most of his novels, is he actually started producing a whole bunch of graphic novels with what might be maybe the fourth biggest publisher out there these days, which is Dark Horse Comics. And if people wonder who's the fourth, I'm like, I think Marvel and DC probably have one and two with a bullet. I know Image is pretty good. They might be number three. Of course, I don't exactly have data on this kind of stuff. But I think Dark Horse is a known name for a long time. They do a lot of licensing, and Andrew Vachss has a relationship with Dark Horse. So some of his stuff he's been putting out there as graphic novels, and some of those I will actually introduce here as I get around to reading or rereading them, as I will. But without further ado, this book here is called Another Chance to Get It Right. And you see there's Andrew Vachss's name right there on the bottom. And this is actually a panel of one of the short stories that's in the book. And this is an anthology of short stories. The person we're talking about is right there. That's him with his dog. A lot of times he's been doing his photos with the eye patch, and I never actually got the story of why he needed it. But I know a lot of times when he does interviews these days, I think he's wearing full on shades. But doesn't matter which he does. You can do whatever you want to do. So why am I talking about this book? Well, for one thing, it's a short one. Look at that. Might be about 50 pages in total. Only some of these pages are actually fully illustrated, but there are about between 7 to 10 illustrators that come in and add their artwork to these stories. Story wise, is probably about 14 or so, and they do go from one page to multiple pages, multiple panels. For the most part, though, even though these are graphic novels, this is not your typical here's a page with a bunch of boxes and cells and dialogue boxes, whatever else. The pictures are ancillary to the story, and they might show a little bit, but it's not thought bubbles, it's not speech bubbles. There's text and there's a photo, and that's it. Some of the artists that actually lent their work here are some big names that are out in the industry. Tim Bradstreet is one of them, Paul Chadwick, Jeff Darrow, who is probably the most famous name that I recognize on the list. And there's a number of others that are equally as talented out there. And again, sometimes they did one little doodle on a page, and sometimes they actually did 4 or 5 pages in a row. Now, what can we say about this? The way that he writes and the subject matter he writes about, it's kind of hard to say, like, I'm into this genre, because a phrase like that almost makes it a pro-criminal or pro-unethical behavior, and it's not the way it's supposed to sound. So it is a genre that is pretty hardcore. It might be considered true crime, but here it is taking the essence of what he's trying to establish and give to us as knowledge in very short stories, takeaways, that kind of stuff. So Andrew Vachss's work falls into this subgenre where, if you actually want to go see something about like the underground of cities, the seedy life underneath, the sleaze of the streets, prostitutes, drugs, crime, that kind of stuff, it kind of really gets you down into like a visceral level of people who survive down there. It's a bad way to say it, but I'll say it anyway. That survive on that level and what they have to do and what they have to do to stay away from the law. Not just law to say, hey, you're breaking the crime or you're committing crime, I'm going to put you away. But these people are trying to survive and live, and they look at authority as in the way. So, how do you live off the grid fully that no one's ever going to find out where you live? Or if they do find out where you live, you've got a couple different hidey places and ways to get away. You have a P.O. box that's forwarded from three other P.O. boxes, so people can't even trace your mail. People really get down into the gritty in his stories. And to read about this stuff and be into it is almost like you want to know the details of the dirt and the scum and whatever you want to call it, but you would never actually want to be there. It's a place to visit in movies and books and fictions, but when it comes to actually, wanting to be in a prison and have a prison sentence, no, you don't want that. But you'll read about someone who's trying to survive in prison because you can always put it back and put it down and then go have a cocktail and go to your own bed and be with your own significant other. So, in these stories, they hunt people down. And even though the reason why they hunt them down might be justified and it's a good cause, you personally wouldn't actually be wanting to hunt someone down, probably. Because then you might have to go into places that you would never walk into and you might not walk out of. So, we'll let a story do all the work for us and we can walk away and go, whew, and think that we know a little bit more about it. It's fun to, in a way, dip your toes into it, but you don't want to actually inhabit those places. But Andrew Vachss actually shows this to you. I can't say for certain how much details that he shows are actually followed by actual people, or how they actually use these techniques to survive personally. But when you read these things, you're a tourist, and he takes you to where he wants you to go. So, what does he want you to see? What is he trying to bring me to? Well, for the most part, it's about how badly the children of the world can be hurt. And again, it's not a how-to, but it does show by doing certain things, you're actually doing this to children. So more of a wake-up call. It's like, don't even attempt to go down this road. He shows you how depraved a person can be, and they can harm a child physically, mentally, emotionally, and you just rip the soul out of them sometimes with just certain forms of abuse that you actually put on children. He has the background for this in real life. He's been an investigator, he's been a lawyer, he works with troubled youths in detention centers, trying to get them actually out of them. Actually, when they get out of them into a real life, he does counseling, that kind of thing too. So it's not like he's just making a story about some fictional place. He's taken a little bit of what he knows that's dirty and then she's showing you how it is as well. So that's what I believe his message actually is. Things are atrocious. This is what has happened. This is how it gets to that level. So one of the ways that he does this is in this book, he has a lot of short stories. Again, some are one page, some might be 4 or 5 pages. But in these things, it is giving you the concept of what you might be doing, even on what you might consider a nice level, but what you might be doing to put a child in the wrong direction. Or being aware of your actions and being aware of things that can be considered abuse. And this isn't abuse in like the snowflake kind of perspective of it. It's actually in the while you're doing harm. And this person who needs you to be a guiding light, you're a guiding darkness instead. So, some demonstrations in here. Let me go through some of the stories in here. This is going to be weird because I'll be jumping from one to another, and the segues in between aren't exactly well thought out, unfortunately. But let's see what we have here. So it does start out very simply, and it tells a story at a zoo. And there's a man at the zoo, and he's the one that actually kind of knows what happens in the world. And there's kids from a school at the zoo, and they're actually all watching the polar bear exhibit. And as they're watching it, kids are noticing that there's like a mother polar bear and then a little cub polar bear. And they're asking like what she's doing, and the guy just kind of gives his 2 cents saying she's protecting her cub. And they're like, well, why aren't they playing with all the other bears? I mean, it's a big enough enclosure. Why aren't they playing with the others? And he just flat out says, if there's another bear that comes close to that cub, that mother polar bear will kill it. She will protect that cub at all costs. And that's essentially what I feel he was trying to say with this is, if you are the mother and you act like a mother and you are protecting and nurturing your child, you will do anything to do that. These wild animals do this in a protective, nurturing way, yet they're also very vicious. It just depends. Are you going after the cub or are you not going after the cub? So that's the story about the zoo. Then there's an interesting little one where it says a person just asks a question, what's the difference between an elephant and an alligator? Or how are they similar? And people start giving the answers like, oh, one's in water and one's on the land. And one's a reptile and one's a mammal. And yada, yada, yada. And the point the person's trying to say is, well, you're leaving out something very important of what you're saying between an alligator and an elephant. And the main thing is, when a baby alligator is born, they are vicious. They are predators from birth. From day one, they must attack and be a predator in order to survive. They're not going to grow, so to speak. They will just get larger. But that's all they know. Whereas a baby elephant needs to be nurtured by the mother. The mother needs to be there to protect it for a long time until it's grown big enough to do its own kind of thing. And in that nurturing, that might assist that elephant to be either a part of a herd, which is like a useful member of that society. It might even be in a circus, in which case it will be trained a certain way and it will act like a circus. But the ones that do not get that mother nurturing from an elephant perspective, you actually just might have a rogue elephant. And they exist and they're very vicious. So the nurturing can make a future in one direction or another. But it's very important for those species that actually have to protect their children as they move forward. The next story has a bunch of different themes into it because it wasn't one story. It kind of has a subsection of different smaller stories in a way. But it is talking about children and growth and what gets them to the future, almost like the elephant does. It starts out with almost an interesting anecdote about high security, like youth penitentiary, so to speak. And there's a slightly built kid who is kind of new to that specific institution, but he's grown up in all these institutions. And of course, you gotta prey on the weak. So this one gang of toughs come after him and they put him up against a concrete wall and pretty much make their intentions fully known what's going to happen. And this kid just sizes him up and he looks him from one face to another, one eye to another. And he just whispers to him, you all have to sleep sometime. And they kind of understand that and tend to leave him alone after that. Again, this small kid is raised in a certain way. He knows how to protect himself, and he knows how to get to the mind of the people who are used to just bullying up on you. And then it shifts gears a little bit within the same narrative. No longer talking about the prison though, and it makes a couple certain statements out there where it says like the World Health Organization, when it talks about animals or plants or mammals and what have you, and what are nutrients in life and what has to sustain you and make you bigger, they do not have a category for love. It's not in there whatsoever. It's something they can't quantify, so they don't say that that's actually something that's necessary for something to grow. Where if you talk to any reasonable person on the street, you would probably get the answer that, yeah, you would need a loving environment in order to grow, to truly grow. Conversely, psychiatrists see kids, adults, and what have you, and one thing that they don't ever diagnose, there's no diagnosis for evil. So because of that, they just have their own other phrases and what have you. But someone can be like the predator of the baby alligator that grows. You can consider that evil, and it's just inherent and in you, and that's the path you're taking because of that. They talk about how if there's a tree with many branches, and some of the twigs and the branches start bending in a certain direction because of natural forces, it will go in that direction. But when the sun comes out, the sun will actually nurture that wood, that tree, that branch. And with that nurturing, no matter which way nature bent it initially because of, say, storms or whatnot, it will go towards the sun and bend backwards with a life-giving nutrient source. And there are many suns in the world. There are many suns in the children's world. How about that? And these suns can all nurture from different directions and have the child grow. But some of the suns not only are nurturing, let me take it differently. Some suns don't only nurture. Other suns are just too hot and they will sear. And when they sear hard enough, that will cause damage to you. They say biology does not make a man a father, and nor does it make a woman a mother. Nothing blooms in a vacuum, even children. So, nurturing goes in one direction, and all the hate brings a child in another direction. Then they segue more to an actual story in here, and it talks about, it's a very nice story, I thought, too, about two friends, two kids in a city. I think most of the time their playground is actually the roof of the apartment building they're in. And then one day they kind of get their hands on this one sturdy cardboard box, and they bring it up there and they decide to play in it, and they decorate it, and they say this is going to be like our airplane or our spaceship. And as they're playing, they're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to fit in this thing? I'll drive it in the front and then you sit behind me. It's like Maverick and Goose. And every now and again they would swap it out and flip positions in the box. But after a while, whoever's in the back wasn't really having a great time until they got the great idea, let's turn it sideways. And now we'll both be in the front and we can go have our little imaginary playland adventures and such. And they did. And for a long time, they explored the universe inside this box, even though they were just on a roof in a city. And the one boy's sister would always see this, and she'd always smile because this is fantastic. Until one day, the one boy has to move away. And while he doesn't move too far away, it is far enough away for children. So now all of a sudden, one of the pilots of this imaginary box is missing. And now the love that made this box fly no longer occurs. So now it's kind of just sitting up on the roof. The one boy who lives there doesn't play in it anymore. The rain comes down, makes it a little bit soggy, and what have you. Now, while this is happening, the sister's getting, upset for her brother. And she's actually been saving up a lot of her money for a while because she saw this top that she really wanted. And it was kind of expensive for her, so she would put aside, all the money she was making on whatever she was doing because she wanted to get this top. And when she finally gets enough, she decides not to buy it. And what does she do? Is she takes the boy, takes the box, they get on a bus, and they go visit the other boy. And the best part of this story, as these kids are playing, was the last line where it says, that box had never had more great adventures than it did that day. So, I did paraphrase that last sentence. I didn't look at what was actually written, but that's the gist of it. It was fantastic. So, it just shows that with a little bit of nurturing and love, and the sister doing a little bit of a sacrifice, you can actually really make someone's day, if not life. Then the rest of the stories are more negative than that. Um, that's the last of the really feel good ones, so to speak. It depends how you look at these things. There's one that talks about a guy, and all he does for his living, whatever, is he tracks down people with syphilis. Because you can get treatment, you can stop the spread, but the problem is that there's some people who are getting pregnant by a person with syphilis, and now they have it, and now the baby's born with it. And that becomes unacceptable. So this person is just tracking down people and tracing them. And he's not tracking them down to kill them or something like that. I think he's tracking them down to kind of arrest this problem. But then again, when stories are over, they can go in other directions. So maybe he's going to try to kill him. I didn't get that takeaway. But then again, who knows? I'm only so smart. One second. Okay, I'm back. Had to pause that for a second. Speaking of nurturing, I have a little boy who has a fever and he's sick and he was feeling kind of cold, so he got my attention. So I made sure he was in a good place. I'm only doing this for a few more minutes, but I'm going to spend some more time with him too. But I like to believe that I'm a nurturing father to him and his brother. Of course, I think everyone would say that, but I strongly believe that I'm here for him. And I'm here with him too, so I digress. A couple more stories I'll mention too, just to show you how this goes. There's an interesting one about the two boys are friends. You know, usually a lot of these stories actually start that way, and the one, so there's the son, and then there's the friend, and the friend kind of gets beaten by the father. And one time it was just too much, and he comes and seeks refuge with the son. And the father's there too, trying to make sure everything's all right. But of course, the friend's father comes to the house and demands that kid be released, not released, but come out, have him go home. And the son's father is like, I don't think we're going to do this right now. Of course, the friend's father is like, he's my son, I demand you give it to me. He's like, we can take care of some of this in the street if you feel like we have to get to that level. And of course, the guy grumbles and goes away and mutters some bad things under his breath. But as it goes on, it's the boy and the friend, they were enjoying themselves. In fact, the friend wanted to become like a marine biologist when he grew up, but now he has all these problems at home. And when he's old enough, he actually goes out and joins the military. And he's away from home for many years. And they say eventually he comes home and he settles it with his father. And they kind of end the story very simply saying he never did become a marine biologist. The next one on the list is a very interesting one about a courtroom. So there's a man attempting to assist a little girl who has been abused. So he actually brings her to an empty courtroom, the one that the trial is going to take place on later on, that day or the next day, but brings her to the empty courtroom with the bailiff and shows her, these are the room, this is the chairs, these are the aisle, this is where the judge is, this is the bailiff, and he stands over there, and let me show you the seat, and you're going to sit here, and the lawyer's going to ask you questions, and some of them might be mean, some of them might be nice, but all I need you to do is just look them in the eyes, remember what happened, tell the truth. And unfortunately, we have this system He tells the girl, unfortunately. But we have the system where if a person is accused, they have the right to see who's accusing them and hear the defense. And he prepares the little girl, saying he's going to be sitting over there on that chair. And he's going to watch you, and he's going to look at you. Don't look at him. Look at me, look at the lawyer. In fact, he's not going to hurt you. And she seems scared. He says, no, 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 no. You see this bailiff right here? He will make sure he does not hurt you at all when you're in this room. And the bailiff smiles and gives her a wave and puts his hand on his gun, saying, he will not hurt you. I guarantee you. So they give her enough confidence and enough courage. So, of course, the court case happens, and she tells her side of the story, and then there's yelling and there's arguing and everything else. But eventually it goes in the right direction, and she doesn't have to worry about this person any longer. So, with enough confidence, with the strength given to you by others, you can overcome. That's pretty much the last one I'm going to talk about. So, I mean, some of these stories, they're very, very short, but they get down into the dirt pretty fast. And each of them is either going to be an example of how something can go, an example of how your actions might make it go in that direction, or an example of how your actions can prevent that from going in some kind of said direction. So there's a lot to be taken out of it. And like I said, for only about 50 pages with artwork, he's able to tell such points and such stories in a very condensed fashion. So I recommend, if you get a chance, take a look at this again. And that's what they're saying with the kids. It's another chance we have to get this right. So I didn't intend for this to be a negative or down or depressing kind of topic, but I do want to spread these kind of things too. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend this. And all of his work, for that matter. And I know I have one already on this channel as a book report. I believe that was Bloodline. And you might see many more as I reread those and have them come through. So otherwise, thanks for listening. Have a good day, and I'll be back as soon as I can. All right? You take care now.